Imagine walking into a place for the very first time, and suddenly people start recognizing you. They smile at you, hug you, call you by a name that isn't yours. At first, you think it's a mistake, but then it keeps happening again and again, until someone looks you straight in the eyes and says, "Why are you pretending you don't know me?" That's exactly what happened to a 19-year-old student named Robert Shafran in 1980. It was his first day at a new college. But somehow, it felt like everyone already knew him. People greeted him like an old friend. Some even hugged him. Confused, Robert tried to brush it off. Maybe it was just a coincidence. Until one student approached him and asked, "Are you Eddie?" Robert laughed and said no, but the student didn't laugh back. Instead, he stared at him, shocked, almost pale, and then said, "You look exactly like my friend, not similar." Not close, exactly. At first, Robert didn't believe it, but curiosity got the best of him. So later that day, he followed the student to meet this so-called twin. And when the door opened, everything stopped. Standing right in front of him was another version of himself. Same face, same eyes, same smile. It wasn't resemblance, it was identity. The other young man's name was Edward Gallant. Eddie. The moment they looked at each other, they didn't need an explanation. They knew they were twins, separated at birth. The reunion was emotional, overwhelming, almost unreal to strangers. With identical lives, suddenly becoming brothers. But the story didn't end there. Because when news of the reunion hit the newspapers, something even stranger happened. Miles away, another young man was reading the story. His name was David Kelman. And as he looked at the photo in the paper, his heart dropped. Because he wasn't just looking at two people who looked alike. He was looking at himself. David picked up the phone. And soon after, the three of them met. Three identical young men, standing face to face. Not twins, triplets, for the first time in their lives. It felt like a miracle. They laughed the same way. They spoke the same way. They even had the same habits. They all smoked the same brand of cigarettes. They all loved the same type of food. They even had similar gestures and expressions. It was as if they had lived the same life. In three different places, the media went crazy. They became instant celebrities. They appeared on TV shows. They were invited to interviews. People couldn't believe what they were seeing. Three identical strangers, reunited by chance. It felt like a beautiful story, but beneath the surface, something didn't feel right. One question kept coming back. How is it possible that three identical brothers ended up in three different families? So they started digging. They went back to the adoption agency. And slowly, piece by piece, a much darker truth began to emerge. They weren't separated by accident. They were separated on purpose. Behind their story, there was a secret psychological experiment. An experiment designed to answer, what shapes who we are? Is it nature, our genetics, or is it nurture? The environment we grow up in. To find out, researchers placed each one into a completely different household. One family was wealthy, one was middle class, and one was working class, and for years, researchers secretly followed their lives. They visited them regularly, took notes, without ever telling the families the truth, without telling the boys that they had brothers out there. They weren't just children, they were subjects, an experiment. At first, The triplets tried to move on, they even opened a restaurant together. And for a while, it felt like everything was perfect. But slowly, cracks began to appear. While they were identical on the outside, inside, they were different. They had grown up in different worlds. Different parenting styles, different emotional environments. And those differences started to matter, tensions grew. Arguments became more frequent. And one of them, Eddie, began to struggle the most. He started dealing with severe depression, the weight of everything, the fame, the truth about the experiment. It all became too much. And in 1995, Eddie took his own life. He was only 33 years old. His death changed everything. What once felt like a miracle now felt like a tragedy. The experiment had destroyed a life and left permanent scars on the others. Robert and David continued their lives. But nothing was ever the same, because now they knew the truth. They knew their lives had been shaped by a decision they never agreed to. A decision that treated them not as human beings, but as dated years later. The full study was never publicly released. Many of the records were sealed, locked away, but their story remains. A reminder that behind every scientific question, there are human lives, and sometimes the cost of an answer is far greater than anyone is willing to admit. Three brothers, kept apart not because of fate, but because someone chose to. Should this have ever happened at all?